All right, we're going to start reading chapter 2 of The Kid by the Side of the Road. And this chapter 2, right below where it says chapter 2, it says, "All patriots must listen." And it says this in very, very big letters. Here at the last day of spring, this particular day is interesting with those people with whom we've been fighting all along. They love their calendar dates, number games, star alignments, and other occult practices. They are a pretty tough crowd to deal with, as they're constantly imposing their agenda on us and casting their spells. They see themselves as wizards, warlocks, enchanters, and magicians. So today, I want to double draw a line in the sand, because these wizards of Wall Street and Washington, D.C. made this fight. These people in the financial and political cities have been hurting us here. At the time of this original audio presentation, that day was the ritual summer solstice moment for these occultists, with high noon happening right at the monument in Washington, D.C. That time was 11:54 a.m., which is an interesting number all by itself. Did you know that 11:54 can also represent 9/11? There is the 11, and then 5 plus 4 equals 9. It's a reversal 9/11. That was DC's high noon. How was that, you ask? Well, this Skull and Bones crowd that is variously referred to as the Order, or Order 322, and elsewhere as the Brotherhood of Death, is an undergraduate secret society made up of select class seniors at Yale University. They have a running joke on the rest of us, declaring that Skull and Bones times is 5 minutes ahead, that Skull and Bones time is 5 minutes ahead of everybody else. After they've completed their high noon at 11:54, we still have 5 minutes before high noon. From their perspective, we are constantly lagging behind and following them as we experience the world through the course they've laid in advance. From the time we first came here on through to today, the history of the country has been an ongoing battle between freedom seekers and the ruling bloodline families we've been made to follow. Who's in control? Do we choose our course or keep trailing behind their course? Are we working for ourselves or working for them? The first settlers sought to flee the proximity of the controlling families while agreeing to pay a portion of their lives' energy to the bloodline-owned corporations in return for their passage. Besides religious freedom, they did not want to be subject to someone else's dictates on every other aspect of their lives, like where to live, what to plant, and who they'd otherwise be subject to. They fled those controlling blue blood families who believed they have the authority to rule because one or both of their parents have the quote-unquote right blood. These Cainite descendants of Cain bloodline families think they are not just merely human, but are more than human. While we are only here to be their servants and slaves. Even prior to the Declaration of Independence, the people that came here and built out America were seeking self-determination to escape these controllers and have their own land where they could conduct life according to their own whim and will. The problem was that those European rulers could not leave well enough alone and just let us come here, be our own people, and agree to trade with us. Instead, they continued expanding and extending their rule across the Atlantic in a never-ending effort to dominate and tax us. They made their rules for us, sent their red-coated soldiers over here, and worked at reigning over our cities and leaders forcing us to serve the king. Eventually, the people had enough. It started in Massachusetts, where they famously orchestrated the Boston Tea Party, dumping England's heavily taxed tea in the water and thereby sending this message: we will no longer pay your onerous tax. We don't want your tea. And if you continue to run your prices to the moon, we'll provide our own or switch to coffee. And in parentheses it says, which likely explains the American preference for coffee to this very day. The new Americans didn't like how our foreign rulers came here and imposed taxes, not giving us a say in how that tax money was to be spent. Virtually none of the funds taken supported development or smooth-running colonies and infrastructure. Instead, all of the compensation for our labor was going to any whim of foreign mischief by the king and his court. And that's the same struggle we fight today with federal taxes that ship our hard-earned money to Washington, where it's dispensed at the behest of well-paid lobbyists for the advantage of their corporate and foreign nation-state benefactors. Like those early American Crown designated taxes, our present tax structure goes to fund their wars and other mischief. We're stuck paying their bills. Those colonists didn't like that, didn't want it, and weren't going to continue, and weren't going to continue being used as slaves. The early colonists were mostly Christians who looked at things in a biblical context. They saw these taxes as a form of slavery that they must throw off, like that represented by Egypt in the biblical narrative. It is interesting that Washington is saturated with so much Egyptian symbology. For example, most people don't know that the root word for president is pharaoh, just as the colonists had to fight for their independence from the European corporate masters and kings. Today, we cannot expect these people to just go away. We also have to fight Washington and the broader globalist corporatocracy and regain our freedom. When we think about what America is and what defines an American, it's really an attitude. We are not solely a place on a map. America is a way of thinking, an idea and ideal. We conduct our lives within laws and a community that adhere to principles under God's authority and function together with the product of our work being applied to our own purposes. An American is not to be under the rule of some king or his minions who would convert our labor into to their gain and our children's blood to pull off their wars. We are unwilling to function as transplanted Egyptians. We are a new people, our own people. And that's the purpose of drawing two deep lines in the sand with our Bill of Rights and Constitution. As a country, we claimed and proclaimed our God-given authority to elect leaders from our own families and communities without interference, thereby determining our own destiny. Against those principles, for a long, long time now, these manipulating hidden rulers of our lives have been fooling us into sifting their people into the midst at key positions. Their loyalists who would look out for their interests, employing every way possible to control us. Over and over and over, they have strategically placed infiltrators who daily work at steering us into following their will, way, and timing. Back when America's government was founded, the situation came to a boil as the colonists tired of those European controllers and their constant attempts to rule us. Throughout the colonies, numerous patriots utilized the then new printing presses as a sort of internet of their era. They published their own thoughts in the form of pamphlets, which competed with the newspapers of the day, exchanging various and oftentimes conflicting ideas about how men should govern their affairs at the city, state, national, and international levels. When those men gathered to work out the final details and sign the Declaration of Independence, that was the culmination of countless individual hours, days, months, and even decades during which our people had rich private and public conversations, including plenty of heated discord, before eventually arriving at those concepts in our sacred documents that we eventually built an entire country around. With the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, the founders drew their first deep line in the sand, committing their lives and fortunes to this new idea and grand experiment. The concept they backed together was unique in the modern world, a nation not governed perpetually by kings and bloodlines, but instead administered by the best and brightest based on their character, leadership, and ability for innovation, as well as the right to be judged exclusively by a jury of their peers. Those first Americans announced to the world, "We will no longer be anyone's slaves. We will not serve any foreign masters. We will not have people ruling and reigning over us just from some false claim of a blood right. That will not be allowed. We will elect leaders who fit our ideals, follow our principles, and perform the roles that we as a community have collectively agreed upon. We're not going to let you dictate our lives and send our children to die in wars for your fits of fancy or random blood feuds with your bloodline relatives ruling neighboring countries. We aren't going to be your mercenaries contributing our lives and substance as fodder for your cannons." In 1776, during the weeks surrounding the summer solstice, the people who founded this country were very clear about where their heads were at. It was a time when our ancestors gathered and discussed all these things at bars and taverns, which were the social gathering places in those days, as well as the churches where pastors were speaking about slavery, freedom, and biblical history. Lessons like how an ancient Egyptian monarchy oppressed the people of God, so he told his servant Moses to go get my kids, lead them out of slavery into a new land. I will show you and teach them how to live. Like those hinge points with the Egyptian captivity of God's people and the many important moments leading up to the American Revolution of 1776, today we're at another turning point. The reality for our modern day society involves this supposedly Russian dossier that was concocted and constructed to affect the outcome of an American presidential election, to manipulate who we Americans would choose as our leader and thereby dictate the allegiances and principles steering our country. We cannot forget that the dossier was put together by nefarious performers working out of the city of London. Longtime players in the leadership of our FBI and CIA, together with other foreign intelligence agencies around the world, schemed as they came and went from London, conspiring against the American people to retain their leadership of the U.S. through this governing group of bought-off saboteurs who would continue to pressure their globalist goals and ambitions. It is about who they are and what they want, regardless of our wishes, because they have only disdain for us, who they see as lesser or as a lesser species. That's what this battle is about right now. And the people who've paid attention get it. But a lot of our neighbors haven't figured all this out yet. They're still asleep. They've been led astray by the mainstream news. Our napping neighbors, friends, and family don't understand that these infiltrators continue to manipulate us on so many levels, and it is still happening right now. Many near us know nothing about this, so it's hard for them to even begin to get their mind around it. But think about this. The manipulation wasn't initiated just a few years or even a couple of presidents earlier. They had these plans and aspirations to control us even before our early leaders signed that freedom document centuries ago. And just as our founders came together to draw that line saying slaves no more, that battle cry is being repeated right now as they try getting us back under their rule after a president they don't control. Won our 2016 U.S. election. Let me say that again, sorry. And just as our founders came together to draw that line saying slaves no more, that battle cry is being repeated right now as they try getting us back under their rule after a president they don't control won the 2016 election. And even after our breakaway, beginning as a country, they still try forcing us back under their under their will, with more conflict like the War of 1812, which was not too long after we'd already spent a decade fighting the Revolutionary War and the lead up to it. As a brotherhood of free men, when our founders branded that document that declared our God-given freedom, it was the final step in their evolving mindset that brought them to this vow. We will all hang together in this act of rebellion against our oppressors, rather than surely being hung separately. Today, we abbreviate that as WWG1WGA. Where we go one, we go all. On July 5th, 1776, the word of their actions went out, and it was only a matter of time before lead would be exchanged, or lead would be exchanged. Most don't know it outright, though those sleeping can at least feel it on some level. Today we're back at the same sort of a situation. Revelations about the infiltrators are coming out daily and even hourly now, as we reassert our independence and sovereignty both individually and nationally from foreign rule, mischief, taxes, and paying for their proposed bullshit green energy deceptions to supposedly save the planet. We are being forced to prepare for this coming time when we will need to re-explain that they're not going to rule us from afar, and certainly not through their sabotage and treachery, especially from within. You see, over these years, every time we turn around, they've been trying to put deception mechanisms in play that cause us to fight a war with them, or for them. And what's their goal? They're not happy to rule all of Europe, or even with adding control over America. These foreign masters and hidden families want to rule the whole planet. A lot of people are Masons, including some reading this now. They're hearing me say this, so I just asked them to think about the prominent Freemason author Albert Pike, who wrote Morals and Dogma. Pike's book gave the philosophical rationale behind the ascending levels of Freemasonry and makes it very clear that they serve Satan. Speaking to possible Masons in this audience, you may trust those beliefs because your Masonic teachings are held in a church with members who are honorable and decent people, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The devil himself enjoys that you are deceived, and as you progress through Freemasonry's ranks, the reality is that the foundation and purpose of these hidden organizations is a new world order, not built on the principles of God in heaven, but instead led by Masonic leadership's god, Lucifer. Those people are sun worshippers. It's why they're so excited about orchestrating a summer solstice celebration to honor the sun that is supposedly rising on all their schemes and machinations. They're having all their rainbow gatherings and celebrations of a supposed new light, a time of coming into their own so-called new day. Well, I'm here to tell you that all this is turning around right now. This isn't about their sunrise and their rising over us to dictate our lives. They thought, or excuse me, though they may not understand to the full extent, this is their sunset. This is the sun setting, and all their trickery and devices employed in the secret to take over our country and rule us by deception. They send their infiltrating and sabotaging leaders into our institutions, businesses, media, and entertainment to do the bidding of their masters against us, the American people. This moment is about the process of extinguishing their sun, just as 2016's election of President Trump was. His second election, God willing, is going to be their sunsetting in spades. And this, and they know they lost, and they know the loss they face, which explains the accelerating chaos they are now causing as we approach the 2020 election. We're in this moment where the revelations and revolutions are coming faster and faster than anyone can believe. It will continue to be astonishing about how quickly new eye-openers will keep revealing more of what they've been doing against us behind the scenes. This will continue over the next few years as the quote-unquote new light of these manipulators dims. We've seen what's coming, we know it, and now the sun's going to begin setting on them, while at the same time, our new generation of patriots are entering another American Revolution as we go from darkness back to a divine light. Though untrue, a lot of people have been led to believe these issues have to do with left and right. Instead, it's about right and wrong. Are we headed to heaven or hell? Do we follow those on a heavenly course or the ones taking that hellish route? These people create our entertainment and sports heroes, political leaders, and the media with its constantly false narratives that they program into our heads through repetition. Think of all the people out there we've been taught to idolize as the good guys, our supposedly respectable and important leaders. One that comes to mind is the mischief surrounding John Kerry. Look what happened to him in his pursuit of 3 Purple Hearts during the Vietnam War. That last scratch was so minor, the medical personnel asked him if he even wanted a Band-Aid or a bandage because it hardly had any blood coming out of it. They couldn't believe he wanted a Band-Aid, let alone a Purple Heart. Those near the incident said, "You've got to be kidding us. We have kids going home in body bags to their devastated families, and you want a Purple Heart for that bullshit?" In fact, it's questionable if the event even happened while this satanic cult was manufacturing that quote-unquote hero. Look at the fake stars we get out of Hollywood like Katy Perry. She was brought into our White House by one of the previous president's puppets. For her visit, they changed the formal dining room color to red. Who is she, and what did she say? On national television, Katy Perry talked about how human flesh is more nutritious than any other kind of food. This came from a woman who confessed that she could not get fame as a Christian singer, so she made a deal with the devil to be successful. Seriously, is that someone we invite to sing at the White House, our country's presidential mansion, let alone celebrating her satanic side by making the formal dining room blood red? It's no wonder Melania wouldn't go into the White House until it was cleansed, after which Trump said Satan had been evicted from the building. People don't understand this moment in time is about right or wrong, heaven or hell. Those who don't choose a side only stand on the sidelines to watch are going to slip right into Gomorrah into hell itself. You have to make a choice. When those men put pen to paper on July 4th, 1776, drawing a line in the sand by signing our Freedom Declaration, they knew it was authorizing their own death warrant. But they wanted to give this clear statement: King George, we will not be your slaves. We are adults with our own nation, and we won't be putting up with you or your minions anymore. From that point, it was all out war. Today, those same people continue trying to control us and our nation. That's what this moment is all about. And if you didn't see that, you're not paying attention. Those conspirators, like Mr. Brennan, in parentheses, it says that is Obama's CIA director, and Mr. Comey, Obama's FBI chief, are about to be picked up and charged with treasonous crimes against our nation because they've been involved with subversive activities. These treacherous people conspired with foreign governments and players for those countries, some of whom are modern-day Benedict Arnolds or Stefan Halpers, who was a spy way back when during Ronald Reagan's administration. And just recently, the same guy tried to become a spy on the inside again, working against President Trump's campaign, while also serving a foreign agent to try engineering the defection of others like George Papadopoulos. Halper worked at getting others to turn against Trump and become inside spies, as did others such as Joseph Mifsud and all his friends from academia to roll over and also become spies. Are you kidding me? Again, this is about right and wrong, a heavenly course or a hellish direction. These people, they select and promote as our leaders, especially if we go the way that today's Democrats are pushing us, would have pedophilia as a lifestyle. They claim it's just another life choice. Seriously, are we supposed to accept adults molesting and raping children as an acceptable way of life? We will not allow them to implement that demonic practice. If you don't think we're dealing with right and wrong, you're not paying attention. It's not left versus right, it's right versus wrong. And who are some other leaders they've been giving us? Fairly recent, it was Bill Clinton who got a Fulbright scholarship. What did that Arkansas Senator J. William Fulbright stand for while he was on the payroll of these bloodline families? Fulbright claimed our Constitution is an outdated document that causes problems for each president it handcuffs. But that is exactly what our founders meant it to do as a safety measure against corrupt leaders like Bill Clinton, who was given this guy's scholarship because Clinton believes that crap. And then, where did Bill Clinton go? He got a Rhodes Scholarship. Well, what is the Rhodes Scholarship about? Britain's Cecil Rhodes believed the United States had gone astray and needed to be brought back under the crown, under the Queen and England's rule. In 1877, Arthur Rhodes said this: "Why should we need form a secret society with but one object, the bringing of the whole world under British rule for recovery of the United States?" His proclamation probably became even more successful than he had hoped. Rhodes taught that all Americans needed to be herded back under England, brought into the nations under the authority of the British Crown. Agreeing with that garbage as well, Bill Clinton also received that guy's scholarship. Are you kidding me? Are these awards that Clinton got for conspiring to sell out the United States and its Constitution supposedly qualified him to be president of this free country? No, both those scholarships disqualified him. Why are we getting these kinds of people put into our leadership? Who is making it all happen behind the scenes? Who is promoting them? If we look back at what Albert Pike compiled from the secret teachings of his Freemason society and put that into book form with morals and dogma, what do Masons say? They tell us it will take 3 world wars for them to realize their great work. And what is the accomplishment they seek? It is to create a planet with all people under the authority of their sun god, Satan, a world subjugated to their type of rule under their father, the devil. This was disclosed by Pike, who was the head of Freemasonry. Anyone who does not think Lucifer leads Freemasonry does not understand. The average Masons go through all the ranks thinking it's about good deeds, helping out our children, and other wonderful attributes. But if that's all, what is the Masonic checkerboard symbol about? It represents their claim to do both good and bad works, thereby balancing them out. But hey, they often meet in the Christian churches, so they must be okay, right? No, it's bullshit. They're about doing the works of the darkness, the bidding of the sun god, Satan. If you are part of that organization or others like it, you will need to think again about what you're actually involved with and whether or not you're just a useful tool in Satan's design. In reality, since Pike laid out their Masonic game plan, what has happened to Earth's people? We've been corralled, herded, and stampeded towards some kind of grand and ultimate cataclysmic event, after which all the children of Adam should kneel under their subjugation. They wish all the planet's lawful governments to be wiped out. Then and only can their worldwide Roman-type fascist, dictatorial, and one-world government rule over the compliant communists and socialist communities that they have made. For those in search of a greater understanding on these matters, research the Fasces lapel pin, and in parentheses it says Mace of the United States House of Representatives, which has tremendous symbolic meaning when Nancy Pelosi wrote it during the Trump impeachment hearings. Also take a look at the fasces, which is fascist-rooted bundles of wood rods that are prominently displayed right next to both sides of the speaker's chair and podium.